This week on Head to Head, Luke debunks the Force. Rian Johnson and Oscar Isaac give their thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker. We ask, who would you rather be trained by? A couple Jedi coming up, and it all starts right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Mansell.
And I'm Darryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. So you had a really interesting run-in with an Uber driver.
Yeah, man.
Week, didn't you?
Yeah, so this week I was, ferrying along with another Uber driver. And, on the Uber app, it kind of lets you know who's picking you up. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, all right, it says your Uber driver is going to arrive in like 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, cool. And it gives the name. I just happened to look at the name and it says Anakin. So
but it was spelled, was it spelled the same way?
It wasn't spelled the same way. It was spelled in a different manner, but
you got to wonder if that's how they pronounce it.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought that was just hilarious.
That is so bizarre.
It's like Anakin Skywalker dies and becomes an Uber driver. That's what happens.
Well, I mean, the best part about it is that in that sense, he was the chosen one. He was the one. I know. It was terrible. With that, let's just go to the canteen.
Yeah, I think
we need a drink after that one.
Well, first up, we have in the cantina our very own Poe Dameron, Oscar Isaac, was not surprised by the reaction of the fans to the Rise of Skywalker. He pretty much said, when he was on the red carpet for the Academy Awards, and then someone asked him from MTV News.
Yeah, that's right, because he was up for, I'm trying to remember what movie it was.
It wasn't Rise of Skywalker. But
no, well, him and, I almost said Kylo Ren, him and Adam Driver were both, like Adam Driver I know was for the Marriage Story.
Yep. But
Oscar Isaac, yeah, he was there. I think he was up for something.
Yeah. But MTV News asked him, how does he feel about, the divisiveness, with the Star Wars fans and the reactions that he had, that people have been giving based after the Rise of Skywalker. And to his point, he basically said, hey, people are passionate about Star Wars. He understands it happened in the last movie, being The Last Jedi. And, it doesn't surprise him at all because he knows the fans are just really, really love Star Wars. And he did make a joke like, yeah, there was some cries, some tears in the shower or whatever. But, he's not really worried about it.
Well, a lot of it, too, I think, is his overall attitude. He's got a little bit of a Harrison Ford thing going, I notice. Mm-hmm. He's basically saying, look, I'm done with Star Wars. I'm not.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised that, I don't know if he did it for every episode, but I know at least in the first few of Star Wars Resistance, the animated series, he actually lent his voice as Poe Dameron in that.
Yep.
And I think he's done some of the stuff in the games too, but essentially because everybody's always asking, well, what about a Disney Plus series featuring Poe or whatever? And he's just,
Yeah.
Done, leaving that behind. Now, who knows? He might change his mind later on.
Yeah.
But his reaction doesn't surprise me only because he seems to be a little bit more pragmatic about things. Like, he understands the fans. He knows, hey, look, there's going to be mixed reactions. No matter what JJ did, unless it was Duel of the Fates, as we pointed out last week.
Right.
No matter what he did, it would have just been...
Yeah, I think people, of his caliber kind of understand, like, look, this is once again like among a long list of movies that I'm going to be in. Mm-hmm. And I have fun. I enjoyed it for what it was.
Right.
And, the guy's a phenomenal actor. This is not his defining role.
Sure.
Unlike somebody like Kelly Marie Tran, where this was kind of like not her defining necessarily, but it was a big, big movie for her. So I can understand why she would kind of feel kind of the pressure, so
Absolutely.
to speak. But for him, he's done X-Men, he's done so many other things. And so.
Well, in Ex Machina, he was doing that, right? I think in between Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and that movie did really well. And you're right, he's somebody that everybody knows who he is.
Yeah.
He's been in a lot of different things.
This is not going to break him.
Right. He had a career before Star Wars. He's going to have a career long after Star Wars.
Definitely.
I think that he'll be fine. I do hope, though, that he warms up. And I'm not saying he's necessarily cold to the idea, but he does seem like he's basically saying that Star Wars is behind him. I hope he does change his mind. And I'm sure that if another project came up that he believed in and thought was cool, you would probably do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, speaking of, Rise of Skywalker and people's thoughts, good old Rian Johnson is back. So Rian Johnson is back. He was sharing his thoughts about the Rise of Skywalker, and quite frankly, he loved it.
I know. I was really surprised. Now, I'm sure he probably would like Duel of the Fates. That would be funny if he said, well, Duel of the Fates probably would have been better. Like, that would have been more the movie I did, but...
fans are like, sure you would. Why didn't you do it then?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you don't want to say that.
I'm surprised he even gave his thoughts on the Rise of Skywalker.
Me too.
Like, the less that he would say about Star Wars, you would think
the better. Better for him. But I mean, he's loved it. He loved being able to just kind of sit back and as an actual fan and not be a director and everything, and that's probably how most fans will prefer him to stay.
Absolutely.
But just the fact that he was able to enjoy the film, he really loved, what JJ did with it. So I think that's good. That at least they're still, I think they've always been supportive of each other, because even JJ has often, quote unquote, defended Ryan, and he's always supported,
Well, here's another thing that you have to look at too. And this was something that I noticed pretty much on the first viewing. Usually the first viewing of a movie, all the stuff's hitting you at once. You don't pick everything up. You have an overall tone that you pick up on, and there's like almost, again, I'll use the word macrocosm of emotions and whatever that you pick up, but you don't usually pick up the nuances. But one of the things I picked up on was that JJ did not really retcon The Last Jedi that much.
No, he didn't.
If at all. In fact, he continued a lot of the threads that were started with The Last Jedi, which surprised me. Yeah,
I think he just pretty much try to make them make more sense in that regard.
Well, the problem even wasn't with Rian Johnson. It was more that the whole cohesion or lack thereof, because once again, there wasn't the planning. That's the reason why, even though a lot of people hated the prequels, at least the storyline was cohesive and it made sense.
Right.
Whereas with this, the sequel trilogy in a lot of cases was all over the place, and they just had to do the best they could with what they had. And for that, I think JJ deserves a lot of credit for The Rise of Skywalker, because even though, again, it's tough to say, Duel of the Fates probably would have been a better movie. Mm-hmm. It may have even been better, or let's just say better well received by the fans. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to say, because obviously all we have is a leaked script, which may or may not even be 100% accurate.
And some concept art.
Which is accurate, which is why I tend to believe the script is as well.
Yeah, because it matches up.
Yeah, because Colin Trevorrow did in fact say, yes, this is concept art from... And he also, when some of the details leaked from the script, he did confirm those as well. Mm-hmm. And so this being more of a fleshed out version, I would tend to believe that that's the case, but who knows? But I'm glad that Rian Johnson liked the film. It would be bad that if he came out and spoke against it. I noticed that George Lucas has been notably quiet about the movie, even though he did have a lot to do with it. So,
yeah,
he did suggest a lot of different scenes. So we'll just have to see
how that pans out.
I mean, it should be noted that Rian Johnson's working on a sequel to Knives Out.
Really?
Yeah, it's been green-lighted.
Okay.
So we're going to get more of that. That, of course, if you guys haven't seen it, was a brilliant, brilliant film. Really good movie. Shows exactly what a good filmmaker Rian Johnson really is.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And, of course, The Rise of Skywalker should be coming out, at least digitally,
maybe like within a week or so.
Yeah, a couple weeks or something.
Yeah.
Followed by Blu-ray, 4K, and everything. So, there's a lot to look forward to still. And I'm sure they're going to continue to pump out a bunch of novels and comics and everything that surround the events of The Rise of Skywalker. So we can, when it comes out on DVD or in streaming or whatever, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to look forward to that will enrich another viewing when you take into consideration all the stuff that's going to happen in the comics and everything. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So Rian Johnson likes a movie. What's next?
All right. Next, we have Kylo Ren's first kill.
All right, so last week we were talking a little bit about his helmet and everything else. So now, give me some backstory. What brought this on?
So you were always trying to find out, okay, how did he descend to the dark side and things like that. So apparently in the comic that you referencing, the Rise of Kylo Ren.
Still haven't read it? All right, we'll let that go. Moving on.
So I'm taking your last shot approach. So
shots fired.
So they kind of delved into Kylo's kind of moments of when he kind of started to descend into the dark side. So there was, of course, a situation where he had with Luke, and he was, he thought Luke was trying to kill him. And then he kind of ran into the arms of Snoke, and Snoke, uncharacteristically, kind of like a father, kind of wrapped his arms around him and then suggested that he seek out the leader, Ren, of the Knights of Ren.
That's exactly right. That's in issue number 1 of the Knights of Ren.
Yeah. And so at that point, Kylo then seeks him out, but then one of the requirements to actually become a member of the Knights of Ren is that you have to kill someone, and it has to be a good kill. So ironically, there's a situation where some of the former students of the temple to which they all belong to, basically his classmates, I guess, if you will, kind of got into a situation with Kylo, and Kylo actually had one particular young lady, I think her name was Vo, and he force jumped to like this ledge, and then he knew that she was going to follow him. So when she jumped, he actually like kind of caught her in the force and was kind of like choking her over the ledge. Now, he wasn't intending to kill her, but somehow he got distracted and
hate when that happens.
Yeah. So he got distracted and lost his concentration and dropped her. And so while he tried to catch her, he didn't save her in time. And so she ended up dying. And so although it was a kill and it was a good kill, it wasn't one that he was really, so it kind of always shows like he was still struggling. Like,
well, and I mean, even in The Force Awakens, we see that he's being tempted by the light.
Mm-hmm.
So it stands to reason that before that, of course, when he's just freshly turning to the dark side, that he's going to be constantly tempted by the light. And this is one of the things that makes Kylo such a compelling character to me, is the fact that we've never seen that in the Star Wars universe. You've never seen a character who was a dark side character, essentially a Sith Lord, even though he really wasn't
a Sith Lord.
Technically a Sith Lord, but
right.
he's functioning in that capacity. But have a dark side guy being tempted by the light. That's like a new thing.
Yeah.
And it makes his character, along with all the other attributes of his character, it makes it more interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just really what's cool is like you kind of see that guy who, it's kind of like even in the Bible, like when I would do good, evil's always present. And it's like, you're trying to do something and it's all based upon perspective. It's kind of like, all right, his perspective on Luke, what he thought Luke was trying to do versus what was actually happening. And I always talk about, even with my students, about intent versus impact. The intent was this, but this was the overall impact. And that's what people really base things on, is their impact, not the intent. So I think that Kylo, this whole arc is going to be really interesting just to see his descent and how Snoke played such a vital role in that.
Absolutely.
And then just really start to kind of slowly twist that, turn that key, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
To kind of like, all right, I'm going to unlock, this dark side, and I'm just going to slowly keep twisting this key, and you're eventually going to get there. And so it starts with the first kill, So that's kind of like one of those pivotal moments for him where he's like, all right, I killed a Jedi.
Now, are you getting that from the comic series then? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
I wonder if the next issue's out, and I just haven't read it yet.
Yeah, that's what a lot of the reports and the things were kind of.
Well, it's like I said, it's a fantastic series. Whenever these series come out, just like the new Darth Vader series, I actually subscribe to the series. It's great because on Comixology, I get all my stuff to Comixology. It's essentially run through Amazon, so you could get a Comixology account through Amazon, or you could just get it independent of. So I have a login for where I could get into it through both. But anyway, you could buy the issues individually, or you could just hit subscribe to a series, and then when a new issue comes out, it charges you. And but that way you're guaranteed to not only get the issue when it comes out, but you don't have to worry about it. It's delivered to you. You got it.
Yep.
So you get it early, and you're also guaranteed not to miss an issue. Mm-hmm. So in this case, when I saw that this comic was coming out, I was all over it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And as Prime members, what's interesting, I mean, it sounds like a commercial right now, but as Prime members, you could get free comics off of there. You can do what's called borrowing them or whatever, where you actually, there's a bunch of some of the older series. And by older, I don't mean, 5-10 years old. I mean, they could be like 6 months to a year old. Mm-hmm. Or what they'll do is they'll take, like, say, a 7 or 8 issue or 10 issue run, and they'll give you like 3 issues for free, and then you could buy the rest of them if you want.
Gotcha.
So that's a really cool way of doing it, and I would highly recommend this Rise of Kylo Ren series because it really does fill in a lot of the gaps that you don't get from the films.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where, again,
almost like Catalyst.
Exactly. It's exactly like Catalyst, which, if you guys don't know, Catalyst is a prequel novel to the Rogue One movie. So even though you don't need to read Catalyst to enjoy Rogue One, if you do, the movie takes on a whole new...
Yeah, it just really, really enriches it.
Like, it completely enriches it. Majorly. And that's what this Kylo Ren series does, is that it takes the sequel trilogy and really enriches each one of the movies. And who knows, maybe when enough of these comics come out, some of the cohesiveness can get put in there,
Well, I would love to see these even, like, come to like a Disney Plus thing.
Absolutely. Or like some sort of animated, yeah. Why not? All right. What we got next?
Well, next, it's time to leave the canteen, my friend.
Is it?
Yeah, already. Time flies when you're talking Star Wars.
It goes by quick.
It's hyperdrive. So next we have Duel of the Fates. All right. So this week, question for you. Who would you rather have as your instructor? Ahsoka Tano or Kanan Jarrus? I mean, you're a light side guy, so you...
Well, I would say Ahsoka.
Why Ahsoka?
Because Ahsoka actually was a Jedi.
Well, that's true.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but look,
I mean, that's
Kanan was a Padawan when the Purge hit.
True.
And he was even telling Ezra in the beginning, if you watch season 1 of Rebels, like, listen, I can show you what I know.
Right.
But we're probably going to, after a certain point, we're going to start learning stuff together. And there was a lot of times, and again, this is what I actually liked about the Kanan Jarrus character, was the fact that he didn't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And sometimes he got it wrong.
Yep.
A lot of times he would steer Ezra wrong, and Ezra would be like, what the heck, man? And he was like, well, I guess I was wrong.
Yeah.
What'd you learn?
Right.
And sometimes Ezra would, in turn, teach him something.
Stuff. Yep.
And it really took that whole master and apprentice Jedi Padawan relationship, and it turned it on its head a little bit, which I thought was a really cool story arc.
Yeah, I did too.
On the other hand, if we're now taking ourselves out of the story and we're saying, okay, which one of these two individuals? Well, here's the thing. Number one, Ahsoka actually was a Jedi at some point.
Yeah.
Number two, she was trained by Anakin, the chosen one, arguably one of the greatest Jedi warriors ever.
Well, not that great. He turned into Darth Vader, but just saying.
But that's why. Because he was really good. I didn't say he was pure. I just said he was, he was very powerful in the Force.
All right.
He knew what he was doing.
Okay.
So he gave her, and I mean, hey, let's face it, up until he turned into an evil Sith Lord that essentially wiped out half the galaxy, he was a pretty good guy and a good teacher.
He was cool.
Right? And he steered Ahsoka right. And Ahsoka also, as we can see, had a great amount of wisdom. Now, I really wish I had read the Ahsoka novel, because that really fills in a lot of gaps between when we last see her in Clone Wars and Rebels.
Rebels, and what we're probably going to see.
What we're probably going to see in season 7, exactly, yep. Which actually should be out this week.
Yeah. Yep.
In fact, the first episode may have already aired. It comes out February 21st. Mm. And this episode is on the 24th. Because we always record the Friday before. So, I mean, we've already seen the first couple of episodes. Not right now, but by the time you guys are seeing this, first couple of episodes will be out. So, yes, we're going to see even more of Ahsoka's journey after we leave her in season 6, or especially 5. Because remember, 6 was just a combination of some somewhat completed episodes or whatever. But this should actually be a really cool thing, that we're going to fill in even more gaps between that. But still, if you're talking about training, I mean, Ahsoka just knew more. She was more experienced. She had more wisdom. Actual Jedi. Kanan's still figuring it out. Now, that could appeal to some people.
Do you think that I guess teaching style do you think you would have liked? Maybe I'll go that route. As far as like how they dealt with their...
That's kind of tough. That actually makes things a little bit less clear, because both of them are, in my mind, equal. But again, even beyond teaching style, you have to go with knowledge. It's like, say you got a math teacher. Our switcher back there, Ron, will appreciate this, being the math major. Say you have a math teacher, okay. You could have, and this is where you could get into a real debate here, because you can have a math teacher who maybe is not as experienced, but really knows how to reach a student. And so even though they don't have as much knowledge as another teacher, the knowledge they do have will actually get deeper into that student because they were able to reach them. But I wouldn't say that that's the case here, though, because Ahsoka is every bit as good and gentle and
nurturing and all that. I think I will go with Ahsoka as well. I think I love Kanan just because I love his transparency. I love the fact that he's honest and he's very he doesn't, he's not giving you any false pretense about who he is. And like, look, this is but then the fact that you see him grow.
Yeah, because remember, Hera, he was a lot more arrogant. And I would highly recommend, even though there's a lot of fans that don't particularly like this novel, A New Dawn, which was actually the first novel of the new canon books. It dealt with how did Kanan become... Like, he was basically in hiding, living a normal life, almost like the character in Jedi Fallen Order. He's basically a Padawan after the Purge. He kind of goes underground, doesn't use the Force. Mm-hmm. And he's slowly, like, he meets Hera, and he's slowly being brought out of it, and he becomes the character that we know once we pick him up in Rebels. It's a really interesting book, and it gives you a lot of insight into his character.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's very transparent. He's very honest. He's very like, look, this is what I know. I'm going to show you. I'm going to get it wrong. When I get it wrong, we'll learn it together.
Yeah. And he's still pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely.
And I think, even the growth that you really see him, especially when he lost his vision and like, okay, you really saw the true maturation of that character.
Yes.
And
but don't forget, he needed the Bendu, though, to somewhat bring that out. But the point is he was receptive to it, and he did it.
And then I think when Ahsoka pops up, she's not the whiny little snips, that we know. And she's, even the way she talks is very calm. It's very controlled. I think
you can sense her power.
You can sense, and it's like a power, and there's a grace to her at this point in her life, which I think she gets that piece. And the cool thing about, and this will be my main reason for picking Ahsoka, it's not so much that she had Anakin, but she also had Obi-Wan. And I think the fact that she got a chance.
Everybody.
Well, she had everyone. She was served.
She even learned from a little bit from Asajj Ventress at one point. I mean, she was just around a lot of really powerful people, but
Mace, Plo Koon.
But you bring up a good point, though, in the sense of that she was a character that everybody loathed when she was first on the screen. Like she was the Jar Jar of the new Jar Jar at one point. And now she's a lot of people's, including one of my favorite Star Wars characters.
I love Ahsoka.
I love Ahsoka.
Yeah.
In what universe did I ever think that I would admit that?
And then on top of that, she did hold her own against Vader, man. Like when you saw that, it was just like...
That was another one of those matchups, almost like the Emperor and Yoda, that once Ahsoka was introduced and you knew she was Anakin's apprentice, in the back of your mind, the whole time during Clone Wars, you're like, man, I wonder if she ever faced Vader. Mm-hmm. Now we got that answer. Yeah. And you're right. It was a really cool battle.
Yeah. I just wish we really, really know who won that one. But there's some speculation on that. But maybe we'll say that for another day.
I'm sensing another Duel of the Fates coming. But yeah, I mean...
Your feelings serve you well.
And I think that, again, we could probably agree that Ahsoka would be the better one, even though Kanan did have...
Yeah, he had a lot of good things.
He had a lot of good points. But
he had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of, experience just being in the world. I think... Right. Even though he wasn't a Jedi, he understood how people moved and how...
Well, that was it. Because he couldn't operate as a Jedi for a long time, like he had to keep that underground or whatever, he had an understanding of, like you said, the people and just the way the normal, for lack of a better term, world worked, that the Jedi didn't necessarily see. Because
when you're a Jedi, I could just do this. And,
when you're also only seeing one thing, because remember, you're the peacekeepers of the galaxy. It's almost like being
that's your job. Yeah, it's like your job. Yeah. It's like when you finally could kind of just assimilate to or people who were in the military, and it's like, now you got to go back to civilian life. It's like, okay, the world is different. It's not so rigid and formatted this way. It's like, okay, no. Here's the other side to it, but you still don't lose that training that you had.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And the other one too, being a cop, if you're only seeing the bad people of society, you start to think that maybe that's what society is. You get away from that for a little while. You're like, oh, there's actually cool people here too. So, but what about you guys? What do you think? Who would you rather have as an instructor? Would you rather have Ahsoka, who, as we know, actually became a Jedi, was seasoned, wise, graceful, all that stuff, or Kanan? Maybe Kanan appeals to you. He's learning himself, and in some ways, that could actually make you a more suited teacher. Which one's your style, Ahsoka or Kanan? Let us know in the comments section below. All right, what do we got?
All right, next we have From a Certain Point of View.
Yay! This is our main topic.
It's our main topic. This is where we really delve into something
Star Warsy
and somewhat complex, if you will. So this week we're talking about Luke destroys the idea of being strong in the Force.
All right. So now, first, full disclosure, where did this come from?
So I guess there's I can't remember if it was a comic or if there was something that was written, but it's basically
once again, this is, of course, a result of our exhaustive research and our incredible note-taking.
Was where Luke Skywalker pretty much says is like, he pretty much throws away the idea of there's someone being more or less strong in the Force as opposed to what the Force really is. And I kind of touched on this a little bit last week, where Jedi or people who are Force sensitive, I'll just put it that way, even before you become a Jedi or become a Sith, you're just Force sensitive. You're just sensitive to the Force.
And you're usually using the Force in a very pure and innocent way. It's usually enhancing some ability you have. A good example would be Luke, Anakin too. They were really great pilots.
Or mechanics, yeah.
Or mechanics. And it's just like, I have this, but they just think it's just a talent, just ability or talent that they have. They're not thinking in terms of there's this all-powerful Force that's guiding it.
Right.
So that's true. It's a very pure and innocent way, being Force sensitive.
And so what Luke is basically saying is that the person acts as a conduit to the Force as far as how much are you, it's almost kind of like the being videographers, it's much like the iris. It's like, how much do you let in? You know, it's like, how much light do you let in, or how much is it open? Is it closed? How receptive are you to?
So I guess if it's more closed, you're more dark side.
Well, it does. The image does get darker,
but
and it's more focused because you don't have it. Don't go there with me. So,
well, but I mean, it also brings up a good point, and I don't quite know completely where you're going yet, but I will say this, that in having this conversation, I start to think about the fact that when you're just force sensitive, you're just purely using the force to enhance perhaps an ability you already have, and you're not even usually aware that you're doing this. It's not until you get indoctrinated with a particular philosophy of the force that you then begin...
The tide shifts.
Where it's a light side, dark side issue.
Yep.
And so one would wonder, if you don't have this indoctrination of a particular philosophy and you just grow this ability in more of a neutral way, where would that land you in the spectrum?
Well, and I think that's where... So when you're strong in the force, it's like, okay, it's like there's knowledge... And then there's knowledge and application. So it's like, if you, like you said, if you're using to like a music part, someone who's musical, a person can actually like, okay, you can tell like you can keep a beat or something like that, and you have a little bit of musical,
like a natural rhythm,
music inclination,
exactly.
Inclination, but you enroll in some classes, your parents see that in you, and it's like, oh, they like music. All right, well, let me get them some piano lessons. That's usually what most parents do. Hey, I'm going to teach them piano because that's like the complete instrument, or, spectrum of music, basically. And then it's like, okay, well, then you might decide like, okay, well, much like yourself, I want to be a bassist, or I want, and then you kind of learn how like, okay, well, you can play drums a little bit. You're not a drummer, but you understand concepts.
Well, and this would be, using that example, this would be like, okay, your parents are smart enough to get you piano lessons, which is kind of like the complete instrument. And then from there, you can branch off. Versus, well, he seems like he's a good bass player. I'm just going to make him take bass lessons like right out the gate. So now you have that particular function.
Right.
So you understand within that realm, but do you really understand music as a whole?
And in this entire spectrum. And I think
this is where light side, dark side come in. What if you were to teach the force? And maybe this is where Luke was going with his particular style of training.
Well, yeah, because when he said, he's like, even in Last Jedi, he was like, the Jedi don't own the Force.
Right.
He said, and he kind of said, like, we're conduits to it. It's like and just like when Rey went because he's like, okay, what do you see? All right, I see life. I see this. Okay, and what else? All right, and then I see darkness. I see it's cold, death. It's like in between it all, and I think that's more so like, that's the balance of it.
He was definitely teaching, even though I know a lot of fans hate this term, but he was basically teaching the gray Jedi way.
Yeah, and I think it was because like being strong in the Force, being knowledgeable. It's like, okay. Yes, I'm a kid and I took piano lessons. And so like, okay, I grew stronger in knowledge as far as but then what about those people who are just, you never had, I never took lessons. I learned by ear. How do you see what I'm saying? Like, so could you compare those two?
Well, if you're Luke and you took piano lessons, whether you had somebody that took lessons, but maybe they only took lessons in guitar, so they understand the functions of a guitar player really well, but they're not as well versed on the entire picture.
Now, how do you fit in that band?
And well, you can teach that though. You can fill in that versus somebody else. Okay, maybe they learned a bunch of different music like piano as well, but they learn by ear. And well, now you can give them the knowledge and the names and everything to some of the things that they know instinctively, but they have a greater understanding.
Yeah, and I think...
And they can communicate with other people based on that.
Yeah, and so I think there's what he's kind of looking at the Force as like a conduit of, all right, a person who can play by ear. Like, okay, I hear something and I can tap that out. Or I can whistle that, and I think that's just like, you don't have to be a Jedi or you don't have to be a Sith, because like if you're just strong in the Force, it's
and I think
it's more of a natural thing. It's more like how inclined are you? It's more so versus being strong in the Force as in, okay, my father was strong in the Force, and because, you know, it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always work just because my father had it that I'm going to be that powerful or I'm going to be that strong. It just depends. Which
is one of the problems as Star Wars in and of itself started going down that path where it's like, okay, everybody's got to be related to some crazy Force user. But then when you go back and look at those guys, well, they weren't related to anybody. I mean, it was Palpatine's dad, and does anybody really care? And that's the big thing that I always point to.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't really care. In fact, even when it came to Anakin's father, now, of course, the prequels sort of explain and give us a history of that, but only because they went back to his childhood. Up until then, we didn't really care who Anakin's father was.
No.
You know, we don't care who Yoda's parents are. We don't Mace Windu's. We don't know. So it's one of those things where I think that Star Wars sort of fell into this trap where, like, everybody that was super powerful had to be related to what I would call this first generation of characters that we grew to know who are also powerful. But then the expanded universe started doing a little bit of a thing that you're talking about where they started introducing these other groups of Force users. Now, they may have leaned a little bit lighter dark, some even gray, but the point is they were outside of the Jedi Sith. Where up until that point, those are the only two groups that we knew.
Yeah.
So it was like they had to fall into one of those two categories. But clearly, what Luke is saying, and what we know from the expanded universe, the new canon, you know, comics, all this stuff, that's clearly not the case.
Yeah, because, I mean, like, you got the kid, like Broom Kid, you know.
Sure, Broom Kid.
It's like another, like...
Now, here's the thing that was really interesting. I meant to bring this up. This could have actually been, like, something we could have just talked about in any of the segments, really, but somebody had brought forth, like, what they should have done. I can't remember who it was. It was somebody famous. When they were talking about problems with Rise of Skywalker, because of the fact that Palpatine was just kind of dropped on us, they're like, what they should have done was at the end of The Last Jedi, instead of Broom Kid, you show Palpatine coming back. So that way we have like 2 years to like think about, oh, dude, Palpatine's alive. Then you can come into The Rise of Skywalker, and now it makes sense because we don't have this jarring thing all of a sudden.
Yeah, sure.
That was like a little bit of a side note, but
yeah.
But I mean, that just shows you, you know, you just said Broom Kid, and that's what it reminded me of. But speaking of him, yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind the Broom Kid was to show the Force belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
It's not just one particular group.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to, you know, being strong with the Force is not as, like, tied to who you're related to.
Yeah, it's not a lineage thing.
It's more just, what are you open to, or you just have this innate ability to do something.
That's why I think Lucas created the midi-chlorians, I hate to say.
Yeah.
To give somewhat of a
scientific explanation.
Or at least, yeah, even if you didn't, I mean, that's essentially what it is, let's face it. But even if you weren't necessarily going in the realm of science, it's a baseline measurement. It's a measurement.
Yes, yeah.
It's basically saying, okay, everybody has this ability, and here's why. You have these things in your body called midi-chlorians, and depending on your midi-chlorian count will determine your force sensitivity, your aptitude, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now, of course, a lot of people hated this concept because, number one, now you're getting more into the sci-fi realm.
You're trying to explain stuff.
You're trying to explain everything, where it's fairy tale. You don't have to explain it. You just take it for granted.
Yeah, face value.
At face value. And I thought that, honestly, the Obi-Wan explanation in New Hope was fine.
Yep. It's a force that penetrates us, binds us. You know, everybody, it flows through everybody.
Yeah, and of course Yoda continued on that. So if you just take New Hope Obi-Wan explanation and Empire Strikes Back Yoda explanation. That's all we need.
Yep.
That's all we need, and it's jibing with what Luke is trying to say.
Yeah.
He's trying to bring it back to...
Yeah, that's why he said, like, the Jedi don't own this power. Like, it's not a power that we own or we control. It's more so we're, like, bending with it, and we're going we're conduits to it. We can feel it. We can understand it to a certain degree. But ultimately, the Force is kind of do what it's going to do. It's just...
We know what I love about this.
And it picks who everyone picks to flow through. You just happen to be chosen. Right. Everybody's the chosen one, if you really think about it.
Absolutely. But here's what I love about this. When you really look at the beginning of Luke, all he wants to be is like, I want to be a Jedi like my father before me. And, you know, he's kind of wide-eyed about it, kind of like how Anakin was when he was younger. Well, then after years of study and looking at the history, now he's all like, Jedi were kind of arrogant and they thought it was all about that. And it shows you that, okay, Luke now has this big picture. He's no longer the idealistic young kid who wants to be like his dad. You know, he has like a real sense of what the Force really is and how it should be used and why the Jedi failed.
Yeah. And not only that, but it also gives some credence to even the villains, because it's like, you know, when even Palpatine, he told Yoda, he's like, Master, you know, your arrogance blinds you or something like, well, was he talking to Luke? He might have been talking to Luke. I can't remember who he was talking to at the moment.
Well, he basically did say something similar to Yoda, though. You know, because it was right after that whole exchange that he was just basically like, look, Anakin's going to be more powerful than both of us. So there's that.
Yeah.
You know,
I won, you know. So
you know, I mean, you're right. I mean, pretty soon you and I arguing is going to be a moot point. This guy's going to surpass both of us. And it was interesting that Palpatine admits and foresees this, because it shows, and especially when you look at the events of the Rise of Skywalker, it's not like he's blind and so arrogant that he thinks he's the guy. You know, he admits like, oh yeah, this guy could be more powerful, but because I'm smarter than him, they're never going to destroy me. That kind of thing. Yeah. And it also shows when you look at the Rise of Skywalker how just blind the Jedi and Sith, like they were fighting each other so much that they were letting the rest of the world go by. It's all about, you know, well, I'm all the Jedi, well, I'm all the Sith, and it's that dogma. It's that, us versus them, and they're not really looking at the Force as a totality, and they're weaponizing it, and they're using it to destroy each other, and and Luke was trying to bring things out of that, right, and out of that thinking. So it really makes me wonder whether they're going to explore that deeper into novels and comics. And
well, yeah, that's why I would love to see a movie just solely based on the Force. Like, that's why I would love, like, almost like what we were kind of discussing before, is if they do this whole, was the High Republic type thing, or if they do like but it's centered around like, okay, the Jedi and Sith wars, like, how did that even begin?
Well, that would be more the Old Republic.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So if they did that, where it's how did these two different philosophies begin, tapping into the Force and more or less trying to bend the Force to its will, whichever side. Right. Yeah, if we could see the origin of that, I think that would be cool. And I also think that would be good, because then you can turn around and bookend that with movies that take place after Rise of Skywalker. It's like, okay, here's how this whole philosophy thing started, to where you had these like dueling ones.
And then now
you can say, okay, now that we're free from that,
what's next?
Because here's the thing that's really interesting too. So on one hand, Luke is saying all this stuff, but then on the other hand, he's kind of like, no, I'm not the last Jedi. You know, you're going to carry it on. And, you know, this is a Jedi's weapon, and almost mirroring what Obi-Wan said. And it's like there's a lot of things in the Jedi that he's still embracing.
Yeah, he's not saying it's all wrong. And I think that's the whole thing when what Yoda was trying to tell him. It was just like, you can't look at something as it's this perfect, pristine thing, and that's pretty much what Luke was kind of. He's idealizing, instead of just understanding. Like, okay, look, there's yes, there's great success, there's great power, but there's also failure. And most importantly, the failure is because we are what they become. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's like learning from your failures, admitting them, not trying to run. Because part of the Jedi Code, and I think part of the problem with it, was the fact that it was trying to eliminate any possible failure. Don't get any attachments because that could lead to failure. Don't be aggressive because that could lead to the dark side, which leads to failure. There's all these different paths that would, whereas Yoda, as the Force goes, finally was like, you know what? Failure is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and at the center of it all, like most of the things with being a Sith, so to speak, is, if you really look at it, it's more like fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. That's what Yoda preached from like episode 1. And I kind of liken that to like, when we were teaching kids, and well, I'm still teaching kids, but, a lot of people, including myself, if you recall, now I sound like Obi-Wan, but,
so was I, if you remember.
Yep. But, and you had to break me of this. It's like, you know what? I used to be afraid of trying this stuff because it's like, I didn't want to mess up. I was afraid of failing. People have real fears of failing. And so that causes you not to just do things. And it causes you to like, just, all right, now you want to just do what you know. That's like, okay. And then that's it. But then you never really do get the chance to see the full spectrum, the full picture of everything like that. And I think that's basically what Yoda was trying to teach Luke, was just like, yes, failure, you can't hold on so tight to these Padawans or to these people. Like, you have to let them go and let them figure this out themselves, because yes, there's always going to be a Kylo Ren. There's always going to be Anakin Skywalker or Vader. That's going to happen, but there's always going to be somebody else to check that. That's why the Force has that balance things, because if someone gets too far gone, the Force realizes. It's no different than like when you eat too much. You're like, man, I need to go to the gym. I need to cut back. So that inner Force.
You know what? I'm having a salad for dinner.
Exactly. That inner side of you is like, I need to chill out because this is not working the way that I need, and it's self-regulating almost. And I think that's kind of how that's going to play out for.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, we'll actually have to see now where this is going to take us into the future.
Yeah,
like the post-sequel trilogy. Because obviously they can go back to and make a million movies out of what happened in between this movie or after that book or whatever. But when they do, and who knows, maybe that could be in the next cycle of films or maybe a cycle or two later. It's hard to say right now. But when they finally start to address the post-Rise of Skywalker era, it's going to be interesting to see where they take it.
Yep.
And what about you guys? What do you guys, all this philosophy of the Force? Number one, are you guys going, ooh, these guys are
going way deep.
A little bit deep. But yes, we are. So if you guys are on the side of maybe the Force should be defined as like Jedi Sith, you're falling into, remember, only Sith deal in absolutes. But maybe that's the way you guys feel. Let us know in the comment section. What do you guys think about, what Luke's learning about the Force or any of this stuff? We talked about so much stuff related to the Force. What do you guys think of the Force? Let us know in the comment section.
There you go.
All right. Well, now it's time to empty ourselves.
Yes. Clear your mind of questions.
Yes. Get our center going, and it's time to clear your mind. That's right. This is where we answer your questions that you guys submit to us. We have 3 questions this time.
Yeah.
Usually we do 2, but this time
we're
throwing in some more. So what do we got first?
First question is sequestered by, I can still use it, by Rick Valdero. And his question is, was Jabba the head of the crime family of the Hutts, or was it someone else?
He was the head of the crime family of the Hutts, actually. But there's different factions. When they talk about the Hutts, it's almost talking about, I suppose the best way to put it is you'll see various movies, or even like in Gotham, right? You'd have various crime families that are sort of related, but they might be started by different family members or things like that. So you had Jabba the Hutt, who was probably looked upon as the big head.
Yeah,
of
the Godfather.
Big. But you also had other Hutts, though, that had their own organizations.
Like Syria, or was it Cicero?
Well, there was Zero the Hutt.
Zero the Hutt.
I don't know if I would count him.
Well, because he had like the whole nightclub thing. He had that
exactly.
whole, and he was like really running the drug stuff. Yeah. So he was kind of like
there were like different facets. I mean, when people think of the Hutts, they think of Jabba. Jabba was by far the most powerful, and there were definitely other Hutts that were trying to step in. But if you notice, whenever they would reference that particular crime syndicate, they would always say the Hutts. They would never say like Jabba's thing. Jabba was just one of the main crime lords. But there were several Hutts that were actually crime lords they just weren't as powerful as him.
Gotcha. And
it also depended on when things hit, too.
Yeah.
Because Jabba was around for a long time. But then, of course, after he died, you had other people come in and take his place. So, yeah, again, this is another reason why I really want like an Underworld sort of like crime drama Star Wars movie or series.
Like the Bounty Hunters,
or something that deals with the syndicates.
Yep.
And all the different organized crime.
Yeah, like you said, Coruscant, like, that whole...
Yeah, like an Italian Job type of movie. It doesn't even necessarily have to be like a heist film, but something...
Yeah.
Godfather.
Almost like The Sopranos or something like that. Just with Star Wars.
Yeah, right. Because I really think that that's an unexplored, yet very rich...
Yes.
When you look at all the source material.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a whole world that you haven't tapped into because, like you said, you got all the... Because that's how we even found out, like, all right, Poe Dameron used to smuggle spices
funny story about that. I was just reading not too long ago that sort of contradicts his original, like in a comic series, they had something about his parents and what they did. So they had to add a little thing like he was smuggling spice when he was a teenager or something. They had to like shoehorn that in order to make the canon basically work, what they've already established.
Yeah.
But yes, or Han Solo.
Yeah, that was it. Like, you got smugglers, you got bounty hunters, you got...
Yeah, you have all these factions.
Yeah, all these different factions, all these other crime lords besides, like, the Hutts. But you had, like, Crimson Dawn, and you had all these different... even, like, when Han Solo was, like, running into all those guys when they all were like, no, you double-crossed us. And he's like, I never did that to you.
Oh, the Contra Club.
Contra Club, yeah. And then you had... so you had all these different people.
You have all these different factions, not to mention... Now, I'm not sure if they're canon anymore. That's the problem. Because Crimson Dawn sort of slid into the... But in the old expanded universe, they had the Black Sun.
Black Sun, yes. Yep.
Now, they could easily bring them back as another... But the point is, yeah, they had all these groups. And you could really make a slamming series of movies based on all this stuff.
Totally.
And it would... I think it would appeal to a wide variety of people.
You would get a lot of people invested in Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it would essentially, like you said, be like a Sopranos and the Star Wars
so
universe.
it could,
or the Irishman.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like, Casino meets Star Wars.
Gangs of New York or something. Or
yep.
Wolf of Wall Street, or I don't know. Any of these movies that would be really cool that you could set in the Star Wars universe, and it would make it really interesting, and you would never even have to have a Jedi, Sith, or any of that stuff in them. And it would be fascinating. Mm-hmm. And if you guys go back to a couple of podcasts ago, like 3 weeks ago, I think, I did a solo podcast, and I actually put in the show notes, if you go down to the description, there is a YouTube video that showed part of the Star Wars Underworld.
Oh,
what Lucas, it was like test footage, but...
Yeah, it looked really cool, too.
It was what Lucas was going to make as the first live-action TV series.
Yep.
So... All right. Well, what do we got next?
All right. Next, we have Alexandria Robinson. Alexandria asks, I like the idea of a Star Wars political thriller series. That's something we've never seen before. Who would you have directed?
I'm so bad with directors' names.
Well, I'll tell you.
I would say, like, maybe the guy that's, well, JJ Abrams, I think, did one of them, but the Mission Impossible movies.
I would do something like along the lines of like The guys who did 24.
Oh yeah, no. So you're talking about doing
like 24 or Designated Survivor? The same guys did the same, basically the same thing.
You're saying maybe they do a Disney Plus series or something?
Yeah, like a Disney Plus series.
You probably would almost have to do that. I mean, you could make a movie in the vein of, say, well,
The West Wing or something like that, or
you could do like a movie. So like in a vein of, say, man, why am I having a hard time thinking of political thriller movies? But any kind of like
Clear President?
Sure. Like a Tom Clancy kind of thing, or a James Patterson novel sort of deal, or
Born Identity,
or Mission Impossible. Even though those are a little bit more like action versions of it or something, but
if you're dealing with and that's why I think she said series. So I'm thinking.
Oh, did they say series?
Yeah, she said political thriller series. So
you're the one with the outline.
Yeah. All right, Stan.
I just hosted it.
Like a little Marshawn Lynch here. So
you got to tell me these things. So if you're talking series, then absolutely, like a West Wing, 24, that sort of thing.
Scandal,
yes.
all that.
So you would need to get. I mean, if you really wanted to make it somewhat political, and like Aaron Sorkin would actually be a good guy. He's the one behind the West Wing. He also did. I can't remember. It was like a news type series about behind the scenes and news and stuff.
Even the guy, people who who write and who direct some of the like Law and Orders and stuff like that. Those
procedural type stuff.
Yep.
Or you could have a procedural Star Wars series. So maybe it's not just like a political thing, but maybe it's a more procedural stuff.
Yeah.
You have these various law enforcing organizations, and there's something they have to solve, and
we about to get the Jedi in on this, or just like I said, you can mention it, and they may
what if
like
a Jedi were a suspect?
Yeah, almost like JAG, almost like that kind of
like an NCIS or CSI or Law and Order or any of this stuff.
Yeah, but just set in the Star Wars universe.
Sure, you could do a lot of things, and I honestly think that they should start to explore stuff that's a little bit outside of the norm,
but that still fits.
Well, it would basically be like genre type stuff, right?
Yeah, like genre. But it's something like The Mandalorian. Like The Mandalorian is kind of like a Western type thing, but it's set in the Star Wars period.
Good point. You could argue that they are already doing that with The Mandalorian. And hey, look, The Mandalorian's successful.
Exactly.
So they just need to do more of that stuff.
And I think that's how you get other fans involved in the Star Wars. I think that's how you widen
widen the audience.
And then I think that's going to quench the palates of all those people who I'm not into the political thing, but this gangster stuff over here, I'm all about this. And then the women who love all the procedural or the political stuff, the drama type things, fits right in there. Now, we're not talking about really reality shows.
Hey, what if you had Hallmark movies set in the Star Wars universe?
Oh, my God, no.
Hey, I know.
My grandmother will watch it.
But you can. Oh, I love them. I mean, I probably have to turn in my man card right here now.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
I love the Hallmark and Lifetime movies.
We got to take you back to the Cantina, man. Got to get you another rum and Coke.
Be like, so what's next?
Yep. And speaking of which, no, but I think those will work out, though.
No, it is good. I think you're right.
Let's see. Our next question, our third question.
Yes. It's a bonus one. Tim Grzykowski sent it in from our Twitter. And don't forget, guys, that you could submit questions just like Tim did through our Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram, at HeadToHeadSW. Or you can just leave one in the comments, and we'll answer on a future show. So what's Tim asking? So
how many different Yoda species do you expect or want to see in season 2 of The Mandalorian?
Yes, The Mandalorian. He, like us, is a big fan of The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah.
So finally, you got around to watching the series, and
I just got one of my students because I found out he was a Star Wars fan. So I was like, "Have you checked it out?" And he's like, "No."
Well, yeah, because you got to have Disney Plus, so it's like not everybody has that. So.
Yeah, so I kind of gave it. He's like, and I told him how much it cost. He was like, "Oh, I'm getting this today." So yeah, he's binge watching that over break, so that should be fun. But it's to his question though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was funny because he had asked me that because he's also on the bowling league that we got, church bowling league or whatever, and yeah, he was asking me the question during bowling, and I was like, well, just send it into our Twitter. Yep. You know the drill. So he did it like
that day, probably.
Yeah, like I went and bowled a frame and came back, okay, check your Twitter, it's there. And sure enough, it was there. But what's interesting about it is that, first of all, as I told him, I'm really surprised that Lucas, he probably doesn't have much of a choice.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
But he is helping, though. Like, he's providing information. He's been on the set, and according to what I've read, Lucas has actually been guiding Favreau and Filoni about Yoda, his species, and all that. Because remember, that was one thing that George Lucas said was never, ever going to be revealed ever. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, we're seeing another Yoda pop up, which at first didn't strike me as strange, I'll be honest. Only because we had Yaddle.
Yep.
Right? So there were other people running around. But here's the key. This is the post-Return of the Jedi world. That is a game changer. And now they're about to go to like the planet or something, and it's like,
see, that's the thing, that's the part that got me, because I'm not so much worried about, I wasn't concerned with the fact that, okay, we got a baby Yoda, because it's like, all right, you know, I mean, he can't be the only species unless there are species that were extinct or something like that. I think that's what they were implying at one point. But now if that be the case, let's just say he was, and then so this species did pop up, I can understand why it seems like this new faction, I guess, of the Empire is really interested in trying to get their hands on it, because it's like, okay, if that particular species is rich with the Force and all this other type of power, and they're trying to get power, see, this is where I'm thinking the Mandalorian is going. This is my speculation. But I think that it's like, all right, they know of this species either because of Yoda from the prequel era. So everybody kind of knows, like, wait, one of these babies still exist, or we thought they were extinct. Mm-hmm. Let's get our hands on this, because I want us to do some studies and some tests to see what it is about this species that allows them to have this great power. How can we use this to now rebuild our empire based upon this? Because you really think about, like, the Empire was based around, I mean, partially it was based around Palpatine and his cunningness, but the big thing that kept everybody in line was the Death Star. Mm-hmm. What is the Death Star? Powered by kyber crystals, which were used for his Jedi's weapon. So it all kind of comes full circle around this mystical power that's kind of like used to harness or be able to control things. So I think that's where they're kind of going with this. So I'm interested to see if they go. I would like to see for them to go to a planet that supposedly has them, but they just can't find them, or, you know, maybe they've been scattered across the galaxy or something like that. But I don't really want to see a whole bunch of them. But
I don't know if I really want to see a whole bunch of them. But here's another theory that has been put out there, because also the Mandalorian. First of all, one of the things that they announced, and we should probably include this in one of our upcoming shows, because we haven't really talked about the Mandalorian season 2 much, even though they've released information. Like, one of the things that we've learned, we're going to see a lot more original trilogy characters in the next season. So you got to wonder what that's all about.
Yeah.
And then factoring in, there have been some theories floating around, or rumors, that Palpatine created Baby Yoda based on some DNA or something from Yoda or something.
Wow.
And he did that to basically create a dark side Yoda, which I should include. I use it as a wallpaper on my phone. Somebody did a concept art of a dark side Yoda. This is really cool.
Oh, sweet.
So, I mean, we'll have to see. And that's the thing. I would prefer that they keep Yoda and his species somewhat of a mystery. Like, maybe we can learn more about Baby Yoda himself. But I don't know if it's a good move necessarily to expose the whole thing. But I do have to say, I absolutely implicitly trust Favreau and Filoni. And especially with Lucas giving his blessing, helping him along a little bit with some of the story. I think they're going to handle it right. It's just going to be really interesting. I don't know. In my gut, I don't think we're going to see a bunch of Yoda type species.
I don't either, because I think that would kind of, that would kind of ruin things for a lot of people.
It would, and it would water down
his importance, or this.
Yeah, and it just, Because then it would beg the question, well, what was this whole planet full of Yodas doing during the whole... And if they are Force sensitive, why didn't they all just kick in and...
Yeah, like where have they been all this time? And how come we haven't seen any more of them? Like, why is Yoda the only one we've seen of that?
And I would rather... It's sort of like Lucas has always implied that is a rare being. Mm-hmm. That the species, there's not a whole lot of them. Mm-hmm. So when there is one, it's special. And that seems to be where the Mandalorian is going, is like, oh, wait, there's another one of these things? We got to get our hands on it.
Right.
And that's where I think, just like you do, that's where they're going to go.
All right.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Like I said before, let us know what you guys think of the comment section about any of the topics that we talked about today. And also let us know what you guys think of the show overall. We do listen to some of your praise and your criticisms. So far, it's good. They've been constructive, and, we take them to heart and discuss them and try to improve the show as much as we can every single week. So it's going to do it for this week. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.